All right, thank you all for joining us. This is our third training session on the Virginia Community Preparedness Fund. I am Wendy Howard Cooper. I'm the Director for Dam Safety and Floodplain Management at the Department of Conservation and Recreation. Just a few things that we want to go over. Please have your mics and your phones muted. The session is being recorded. I believe you all heard that as you logged in. Make sure that you turn your camera off if you don't wish to be recorded. The recording will be available online. All comments and questions should be put into the chat box, and we will answer those questions as we go through the presentation. This document for the questions and answers will be put on our website at www.dcr.virginia.gov/CFPF. So any questions that you have will be recorded and answered and posted on our website. Next slide, please. So let me introduce my team before we dive in. On the line from DCR, we have Angela Davis, Brandy Buford, and Michael Barber, who comprise the floodplain management team for DCR. Also on the line from our PCMO office are Julie Buchanan and Mary Bishop, and our Deputy Director over Dam Safety and Floodplain Management, as well as Soil and Water Conservation, is Daryl Glover. Alrighty, so the CFPF, the program was established in 2020. Most of you are aware that Virginia joined the Greenhouse Gas Initiative during that time period, and it allows the department, the state, to collect funds for the sale of carbon credits. And DCR has, as you're aware, been receiving those deposits for 2 quarters now. This program really is to support the regions and the localities to reduce the impacts of flooding statewide, and flooding particularly driven by climate change. We are prioritizing projects that work in concert at the state and local and federal level to ensure that we have resilient communities across Virginia. And we're also coordinating with the Virginia Coastal Resilience Master Plan. All of the work that we're doing really is for the whole of the Commonwealth, so that all of our communities are empowered to really meet the needs of their citizens. Next slide, please. Thank you. So as I said, Virginia is one of 11 RGGI members, and that includes Connecticut, Delaware, Maine, Maryland, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, New Jersey, New York, Rhode Island, and Vermont. And our state is part of this effective 2020. And the goal is to reduce carbon emissions by 30% by 2030. So that's really what's driving the work that's happening in CFPF, getting the funding that happens as a result of this initiative. Next slide, please. How are funds allocated through RGGI? This is really a great deal of money that we're talking about. In the first round, DCR received 19 million. In the second round, DCR received 20 million, and that's really just 45% of what is available. So we're really talking about a lot of money here. And per the regulations, DHCD receives 50% of the money for low-income energy efficiency projects. DCR receives 45% for the Community Flood Preparedness Fund, which is what we're talking about today. There is an administrative component that goes to DEQ because they manage the fund, and administrative expenses for low-income energy efficiency programs at DHCD and DMME is also part of the regulatory carve-out. Next slide. So on March 3rd, Virginia participated in the first auction, and 43.5 million came to Virginia, of which 19.5 million went into the CFPF fund. The first round of funding from that particular auction was released on June 4th, and that round closes soon, and we'll go over that shortly. The second round was 45.4 million on June 2nd, and the CFPF received 20.4 million of that. We have two more auctions slated for this calendar year, September 8th and December 1st. Next slide, please. So this is the schedule, and as you all are aware, June 4th, we released the first grant manual. That grant closes, application round closes on September 3rd, and we expect to have our announcements out on September 30th on those awards. The second grant round was announced last week on the 5th. That one closes November 5th. And we expect to have those awards announced before Christmas, around December 15th. And then we expect to have a third round be announced on January 6th of 2022. At the current time, we are working on a process to see if we can include loans in that grant round. That will require us to do a 30-day public notice, and there's some other components that we have to consider. So those things are still in the works right now, and more information will be released on that later. Next slide, please. So the grant manual is broken out into various sections. Part 1 really talks about the planning principles and the guiding principles that we have for what we're trying to accomplish under this program. And Part 1 also includes the definitions that are applicable to this program. Next slide. Part 2 provides you with eligibility requirements and the application procedures. It's really important to understand, again, what the limitations are for this program and what we are really trying to accomplish with this program, and how we will receive applications and how those applications will be reviewed and funds awarded. Next slide, please. Part 3 is where you get into the meat of how you want to apply for funding. It tells you really what's eligible, what those activities are. It gives you those descriptions. There are 3 sections that you can apply for funding in this grant: capacity building and planning, flood prevention and protection projects, and studies. And each of those carries their own separate requirements. Next page, please. Excuse me. So each application component has specific sections that are necessary. There is a scope of work narrative that's necessary for capacity building and planning, as well as projects and studies, and there are specific elements that are outlined in the grant manual for each. And there is a budget narrative that is required regardless of what type of activity that you are applying for. Next slide. The grant manual is broken out into various sections, as we just went over, and there are a series of appendices that are included for your assistance. Appendix A is the actual form, the application form. B, C, and D is the scoring criteria that DCR is going to use when we're looking at and ranking projects, studies, as well as capacity building and planning. So you should make sure that you're looking at those. There's a checklist there to ensure that you have all of the components that you need for capacity building and planning. There's an extension form that would not be required unless you were awarded funds and needed to extend the grant period for whatever reason you may have for that. We also have a list of community ID numbers. Every community that participates in the NFIP has a community ID number assigned, but there are communities that do not. And so we created a list for you. So if you don't know your community ID number, Appendix F is where you will find that. And the last appendix really talks about the resilience plan. The resilience plan is a very important component of this, this grant program because number one, it's required before any projects will be awarded. Resilience plans really help DCR evaluate whether there is a whole community approach to resilience. Appendix G talks about what those requirements are. I know a lot of communities have already have many plans in place. They have their comprehensive plans. They may have, it has a mitigation plan. They may have other plans in place in their communities, and there is no need to create a standalone resilience plan. What DCR is asking in this grant manual is that if you have those other things in place already, create an executive summary, if you will, that answers specific questions, the specific requirements of the resilience plan, and tell us specifically where to locate those items in those existing plans. If you don't have those plans, if you don't have a resilience plan in place, you can't apply for a project until that plan is in place. So I just want to make sure that we're clear with that. Again, if you don't have multiple plans that you can pull from to create this executive summary, you will need a standalone resilience plan. If you do have those plans in place and you can pull from them, the executive summary would really need to summarize the answers to the required components and tell us the page number, where we can find that information in those various plans. I'm going to turn this over right now to Michael Barber to go over the specific requirements of the resilience plan. Michael?
Thanks, Wendy. Hey, everybody, good afternoon. This is Michael Barber. So as Wendy was saying, next slide, please. So as Wendy was saying, your resilience plan can be constituted by either a standalone plan approved by the locality, or it can be a synthesized document of various other plans that are already approved. So your hazard mitigation plan, your comprehensive plan can all have supporting elements that contribute to a resilience plan. Again, they're required in order for an application, excuse me, to be eligible for the flood prevention and protection projects category. So you don't need an approved resilience plan from DCR to be eligible for the other two funding categories, but an approved one is required to be eligible for flood prevention and protection projects. And once DCR has approved a community's resilience plan, that approval will stand eligible for 3 years from the approval date. So you can use that same resilience plan for further applications in future grant cycles. So the requirements that we're looking for, and these are all outlined in Appendix G of the grant manual, are first that it needs to be project-based. So somewhere in that plan, in that standalone document or the synthesis of documents, there needs to be specific projects outlined or a framework for project selection and prioritization. So we're basically looking for here the action items that your community wants to use to move the needle on flood resilience. Second, we're looking for provisions and prioritization for nature-based resilient solutions and infrastructure. So we want to see that the community is looking beyond just hardening and armoring for more sustainable solutions for floodplain resilience. And third, it needs to identify and address flooding issues faced by all portions of the locality, whether you stratify it by race or geography, income, other means. Fourth, it should include coordination with other interjurisdictional plans, projects, and activities. So we just want to see that it meshes well and doesn't conflict with any other governing documents and activities that interface with the community. And fifth, we want to see that it incorporates the best available science. So we're just looking for reference to and consideration of the latest and the best available data regarding climate change, sea level rise, and other elements that impact flood projections in your community. So again, all of this is in Appendix G of the grant manual, and there's also a list of about 15 other examples of elements you'd find in a successful resilience plan that can kind of guide your approach to either drafting a standalone document or synthesizing a group of already existing approved documents. So yeah, those are the 5 guiding requirements. And if you guys have any questions, just drop them in the chat.
Thank you very much, Michael. Next slide, please. Alrighty, so this slide provides the website for DCR, for the Community Flood Preparedness Fund, and it also provides the email address where submissions and questions, resilience plans, all of those things should come to. So cfpf@dcr.virginia.gov is where all grant applications, all resilience plans, all questions outside of this meeting, of course, should be submitted. And dcr.virginia.gov/CFPF is where you can find additional information on the program. Now let's answer some questions. Yes, go ahead.
Sorry, this is Julie Buchanan in the communications office. Daryl Glover is on the call now, just so you're aware.
Daryl, do you have any comments before we answer questions?
I just want to encourage everyone to participate in this program. It's a tremendous opportunity to improve and protect your communities. Just be mindful of the specific requirements so that you can have a successful submission. And ask us if you have questions.
Thanks, Daryl.
From Chris Stone, will DCR make available approved community resilience plans for review and reference to those localities that are trying to develop one?
That has not been a decision DCR has made. We've only received a few resilience plans, and we would have to ask the communities that have them if that would be okay to share. I would say that a lot of communities are so different, but the bones should be the same. So I think we could probably develop some type of template or training that could help folks develop a resilience plan if we're not able to share one that has been approved.
Okay. Next question from Daniel Medina. How are the project proposals being evaluated?
Thanks for that question, Daniel. There is a section in the grant manual that talks about the review process. DCR, Secretary of Natural Resources, will review these applications, but there is a scoring criteria that is in the grant manual that will help us prioritize these projects. And that is the basis of how they'll be evaluated.
And one from Jill Bieri. If we're applying for a planning and capacity award to create a resilience plan, will that completed plan be approved for project awards in future rounds, knowing the plan must include the elements that were outlined?
Yes, that is, I can't say, yes, your resilience plan will be approved, but it would be approved if it met the requirements of the grant manual. So what I would say to you is you're doing the absolute right thing, applying for a planning and capacity building award so that you can actually build a resilience strategy. Part of that planning and capacity building would be identifying all of the areas of your community, all types of flooding, the populations that are at risk and vulnerable for flooding, and developing a strategy to manage and mitigate that flooding that's occurring in your community. Deciding whether you are looking to do nature-based projects versus hardened projects. You would make those decisions based on what's in your community. And so long as the projects that you want to do are reflected in your resilience plan, and the resilience plan meets the components of the grant manual, there's really no reason that we would not approve it. Well, we'll hang on for a few more minutes. Team, did anyone have anything else they needed to say? I would like to absolutely thank everyone for joining. This is the third training session that we've had on the CFPF So I'm really glad to see that there is participation here. But Angela, Michael, Brandy, anything you would like to add here before we close out?
Yeah, I just want to add that in regards to, kind of getting a clearer picture of the resilience plan development process, we're developing a resilience plan training that should pretty much answer any of your questions that the grant manual can't at face value. We don't have a timeline for rolling that out or distributing that training yet, but that is something that we're working on, and we hope to be able to provide for you soon for future grant cycles.
Right. Okay, I see that Jill has a few other questions. Is it unclear if the scoring criteria should be completed by the applicant? Yes, the grant manual says that you should include Appendix B, C, or D, I believe, as part of your application, part of your scope of work. So yes, you fill that out, and it's there so that you can understand what the ranking is in terms of points for your project, but it's also the tool that we will use to evaluate and compare projects against one another. And you have a few other questions. So we score the elements. Yes, you score them based on what you are providing in your application. And we're going to review that to see if it actually meets the components of the grant manual and if that score is appropriate so that we can adequately rank and score each project. Okay. Carolyn, you asked if there are any notable differences between round 1 and round 2. No, there are not. The only differences really between round 1 and round 2 grant manual is dates and dollar values. Otherwise, we would have had to put the manual out again for public comment. It is essentially the same. Again, any questions that you think of after this webinar, you can email cfpf@dcr.virginia.gov. I am answering those questions. So feel free to email any questions that you have. We will help you as much as we can. Again, as Daryl said, this is a tremendous opportunity for localities, for communities to really get some of the work done that has been plaguing our communities for such a period of time. The repetitive flooding, the loss in businesses, transportation issues, all of those things that have been impacted because of flooding. This is an opportunity that we have to seize right now. We don't know how long the funding will last. We will do everything that we can with it while we have it. So seize the opportunity. I do encourage all of the communities to not worry so much immediately about projects. I encourage you to evaluate your capacity and your planning and any studies that you need. If you really need to build a new resilience strategy, I encourage you to take the time to do that, to use this fund to help you do that so that you are better positioned to do projects that are meaningful and lasting for your community and not just one-off. So please bear that in mind.
Wendy, Jill actually has 2 more questions there.
Okay.
I don't know if you saw. She did ask earlier about are letters of support needed?
Letters of support are needed for a variety of things. If you are doing a regional project, every community within that region must submit a letter of support. If you have cash match that's coming from a partner, that letter of support and that commitment of match is required. So in those 2 instances, yes, letters of support are required.
And then she had a follow-up about the required elements. Part 4, you might need to read this one. Where should they be located in the proposal? We have them included in narrative, but want to know if we should call out or highlight specifically.
Part 4. Okay, so you would have your application, then you would have your scope of work narrative for whichever type of activity you're providing. And the scope of work narrative in the grant manual breaks out specifically what those components must be. And then you have your budget narrative. So all of those things make up the application. So look at the grant manual and look at each item specifically. The application has specific components, the scope of work has specific components, and the budget narrative have specific components. And that makes up the full application, along with any attachments that you may need to send in. Does that answer your question? Yes.
I'm sorry to have so many questions.
No.
Yes, I think I understand. It's just, you know, the components are sort of called out throughout our narrative. Do we need to say this answers a specific question for those components, or if the components are already in our narrative, is that okay?
I would say that in your scope of work narrative that you specifically call out those requirements that are laid out in the grant manual.
Okay. Okay.
To ensure
great.
that you're addressing every single thing that's requested.
Great. And can I ask my very last question without having to type it?
Sure.
Thank you. There's very little guidance on like page limits and size of the file and how many attachments we can have and that sort of thing. Is there any guidance on that that you could give us verbally?
We did not set any limits on that.
Okay.
Yeah,
Good to know.
as we move toward a grant management system, and we're in the process right now of bringing that up, that could be a very real possibility in the future, just based on limitations of the system. So bear that in mind, but right now there are no limitations.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Wendy, there's a question from Linda Hubbard. Could an application for round 1 or 2 still be considered into round 3 or future?
No, you would actually have to submit an application for each round. You can submit the same application, but if it didn't get funded, I mean, but you would have to submit a new application for each funding round. Any other questions? I know I'd asked for comments from the team and Michael commented, but we got sidetracked. Angela, Brandy, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
I did not. Actually, Michael covered my comment that I would have had.
Thank you. Thank you.
No additional comments, just highly encourage everyone to apply. The money is there.
It is there. All right. Well, if there are no other questions, I thank you for your time. And again, if you have questions after this, email us. We'll get back to you. We look forward to reviewing your applications and your resilience plans and getting this money out on the streets so that folks can do the great work that we know that you do. So thank you very much for your time.